Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to class today. Thank you for joining me, whether you're watching live or you are watching the recording. I appreciate you watching. Thank you for joining me today for our second live stream of the semester, getting things going pretty quickly. First thing I want to do today is thank each and every one of you. Much appreciation for getting your EVA assignments completed on time. I don't have to go looking for anybody, which makes me exceptionally happy. Saves us both a lot of time. Thank you all. So I am very much looking forward to working with everybody this semester. I think we're going to have... Well, I guess a great time remains to be seen, but I think we'll learn a lot. So, looking forward to all of that. Today, what we're looking at is we're just kind of going through that HTML and CSS Bootcamp module, and I think one of the things that kind of helps me out the most, is when I see other people's processes and the way that they do things. So I just thought today, one of the big things that I would do is kind of walk you through my process, how I would handle something like this, just building some basic HTML and CSS and just refreshing your memory on a few things and all this sort of fun stuff that, maybe you don't remember because it's been a while since Web 115 or, the last classes where you've done this sort of stuff. Right, so since this is, second level class, we rely fairly heavily on, previously learned material. So it's very important that you have a good understanding of the basics before we start building on top of it, right? Like this is the second level course for Web 115. So sort of the basics of that is what we do in the boot camp just to get everybody up to speed. And that's what we're doing today. So I'm going to walk you through my process. And first of all, I just want to kind of show you all my environment that I use. And I do use Visual Studio Code as my environment. Here I am on the website where you can see it to go download it if you'd like. It's code.visualstudio.com. It's available for any operating system, whether you use Windows, Mac, Linux. It's even actually good for Chromebooks. You can actually use a version of this on Chromebooks if you don't have a device, or if all you have is a Chromebook. Obviously, I'd rather you all be using a Windows machine for this. That's going to be something that's more common, a Windows machine, a Linux machine, or a Mac, really. Something that's not a Chromebook. But if you ever go out somewhere and you need to write some code real quick, you can actually go to vscode.dev. And this is a web version of the software. So you can do the same stuff that you do in the desktop version, in the web version. Works basically the same. But this is where you download the software. You'd run it from here. You've got several download links here to be able to do that. It also gives you that vscode.dev link here, so you can see that it's made by the same people, right? Like it's not like a third-party thing that somebody else made. You just download, you install, you do the standard stuff that you would normally do for an installation. And once you get it all installed, it looks like this. This is what you'd get, or something similar to it, after it comes up. The link, by the way, is also in your course as you are, going through module 1 there, the bootcamp module. This Visual Studio Code is linked as the first link in the text editor section. We're sort of graduating to some big boy tools here. So that's what we're doing. So that from here, there are several options in terms of how you can actually get into a project. Right? And so I can make, I can use Windows Explorer, and I can make a folder on my machine, and I can go up here to File and open my folder from here and just use the GUI. But one of the things that I like to do, and since I'm showing you all my process here, is I like to use a terminal. Again, you don't have to, right? You don't have to use your terminal here to create your folders and your files and stuff, but I like to use my terminal just because it makes things a little bit quicker for me. So, for example, here I can just use my terminal commands. For example, I'll change drives there. I will make a directory called Web215 Fa23. Then I'll cd inside of there. And I'll make a directory in there and call it, say, Bootcamp. And so now when I cd in there, cd Bootcamp, I can run code period, and that will open that folder in VS Code. Just like that. So now you can see over here in the Explorer window, I am in the Bootcamp folder. Right? You'll remember from the other version I had up, if I look in the Explorer window, it's telling me to open a folder. I don't have a folder open yet. Right? But if I do it that way, then I have Bootcamp open in my Explorer window here that I can use. And if I look in my Windows Explorer here in the GUI, I can actually find this folder here. And we can work with it. So you can see there's Web215 Fa23. If I go inside of there, there's a Bootcamp folder. And I can actually add files and folders from here from my Explorer window. So if I wanted to add an index.html, which is what we need for every website, I can add an index.html here. And we can see if I go down here, it adds my index.html in the folder. So we're good there. If you hear the fire alarm, it's okay. They're working down in the gym today. They told us to ignore the fire alarm, so we're good. I'm in my office with the door closed, and I can still hear it through my headphones. So perhaps all of you can as well, so don't worry about that. I'll also go ahead and create my CSS file here. We'll call it style.css. And so now I have two files in this Explorer directory, my HTML file and my CSS file that I can work with. And so now I can add my HTML skeleton. And adding the skeleton here is pretty simple, right? So we discussed the skeleton in Web 115, and it was, fairly simple, right? We talked about the doc type and the HTML tags and the head tags and the body tags. In Visual Studio Code, as well as some other files, as long as it knows that I'm writing in HTML, there are some things out there that will help me out. So I can actually add an exclamation point in here, and this will allow a contextual menu to come up that'll say Emit abbreviations, exclamation point. And so if I hit enter here, it'll actually write my HTML skeleton for me. Just a moment. I will be right back. Have something come up here. Okay. All right. Sorry about that, everybody. You know, business still happening. So now I can change my title here. We'll change this to Bootcamp site. And we'll just save. You'll notice in Visual Studio Code, if you have unsaved code, it'll have like a little white circle up here in the tab but when you save it, it goes away. Right, and then I have my style sheet here, style.css. So I need to be able to link that style.css file to this HTML file so that I can, so my HTML file can see my CSS file and apply the styles accordingly. Right, so I need to put my little CSS link in here so that it knows what I'm doing, right? And so that's in the module there. That's in the CSS styling section of the Bootcamp module right here beneath my title. I'm going to add a link rel equals style sheet type equals text / CSS and href equals style.css. And our link tag is a self-closing tag, so I can just add my self-closer to the end there. And we're good. So now this file knows of the style.css file's existence. Or at least it will once I save it. So now I'm going to show you another one of the cool things that I like here. We're going to take a little bit of an aside here, because I'm going to open this in a live server. So that I can see my changes as they're being made, right now that I have everything set up. And so to do this, I have a plugin installed. If I right click here, you'll see open with live server come up on the contextual menu. And what this actually does is it creates a virtual server on my machine that automatically updates when I make changes. And this is one of my favorite things. And you can actually add all sorts of different types of extensions to Visual Studio Code. If you look here on the menu bar on the left-hand side here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 icons down. Looks like 4 squares with 1 square breaking off. You'll see extensions here. And you can see I have a ton of extensions installed. I have way more extensions installed than you all will need this year. Right, like I've got stuff installed for R and various programming languages. Right, that's one of the cool things about Visual Studio Code as well, is that you can use it for basically every programming language. So if you get used to one, you can use it in all of them. My favorite live server plugin is this one right here. Live Server by Ritwick Day. See if I can zoom into that here, so y'all can see that a little bit better. Live Server by Ritwick Day. It's my favorite server plugin. Works really well. You won't have it installed, obviously, but if you go up here to the Extensions Marketplace and you type in Ritwick Day's name, DEY, you'll see Live Server, or if you type in just Live Server, you'll see it come up. It has the little purple icon like this. You will want to be kind of cognizant of the downloading the correct one because it is a popular server plugin, right? So there are imitators, often imitated but never duplicated. Like if I click it here, it'll open more extension information in a tab, and you can see that this particular live server item has been downloaded over 38 million times. So it's incredibly popular, often imitated, never duplicated, creating a local LAMP server to make things nice and easy. And you can see there'll be a button right here that says install. You just click that button and it installs it for you. It is super easy to use. And once you have that, you can just right click in your HTML window and tell it to open with a live server. And it will open it up in a browser. Right? So for example, here it is. Tell you your live server is running. And it opens it up in your default browser. You can see it's on localhost, port 5500. And it's my index.html. Now, the reason why we use index.html instead of another file name is because that is the default homepage for a folder. So for all intents and purposes, if I took index.html off of here, it's going to give me the exact same site. If I use a different file name here, then I would actually have to append that file name onto the end. So I'd have to go slash whatever other file name. Right, but since I'm using index.html, that is the root file. So if I have any other folders in my project, for example, if I had another folder that I put into Bootcamp, let's call it subpage. And inside of that folder, I put an index.html. We'll add a little HTML skeleton. Put a subpage in here, put a subpage title in here. I'll even link it to the same style sheet, so I'll just copy it. Now it won't, since I didn't do a folder here, it won't know that exact same style sheet, but I can modify the path just a little bit. So if I do say dot style, that's it, because I'm going up. So if I want to indicate the parent directory, it is dot slash. Dot slash style.css. There is a good way to test this, right? Like if I went in here and I went to body and I made background color red, just to make sure I remember things, right? This is why I have to practice things like this. This is why I'm having you all do things like this, because it's the same reason why I have to do things like this, because, if you don't practice, you get a little rusty. Now, if I go to my Bootcamp site, I can see my background is red. And if I go to slash subpage, which is the domain, I can see that that page is red as well. So I know that dot slash style.css is looking up a level into the root folder. To find that style.css. So that's working as I intended it to work, which is great. Right, but this is to show you that if I rename this, however, right, which is why I was doing this, if I rename this file, which I can do here by just right-clicking and selecting rename, if I rename it to, say, subpage.html, and I look at my file here, now on my subpage domain, you see it doesn't go to the page, it shows me my list of files, and so if I want to actually go to the subpage HTML file, I have to click on that file or go to subpage.html, right? So that's why we use index as our default name for a file in HTML because it is the root, it's the default root for a folder. So it'll go to that page directly if you go to the subpage. Right, so that's nice. I think I'd like it. So I'm going to get rid of that background color because I am going to want to do a little resetting here. So whenever I create a new page, the very first sort of styling that I like to write, I call it my reset code. And so these are CSS rules that I'm going to apply to everything on the page. Right? And so I can do that with an asterisk selector, which is a wildcard selector. I normally mention this when I teach Web 115. If you didn't take my Web 115, then you might have missed it. But the asterisk just basically means everything, right? So it's a wildcard, it's everything. So for everything, I can say box sizing border box. Like that, right? That way I don't have to worry about I don't have to worry about kind of thinking through box model. I can use the box model hack that we discussed in Web 115, which is changing the box sizing to conform to the border box boundary instead of the content box boundary, which makes life a whole lot easier on me. Another thing that I can do, if I want my font to be, say, sans serif, I can set that here as well. This is also a good place where you can like set some baseline sizes, things of that nature. Another good thing that we talk about a little bit later on in the course that you could do up at the top of your CSS file here is to create some variables and work with that. We'll talk about that later on in our courses this semester, is how we work with CSS variables. But I'm going to try to stick this to being just things that we learned in Web 115 today, just so we can kind of have an understanding of what we're doing there. So with that in mind, let's actually start to build this site. I had it as a red background color before just to see my code work. So now on body, let's add a background. Let's add a different background color. Let's add a better background color. Let's see here. I can actually let's use the image that I have provided for you all in the project. It's like a purple, right? It's this Ninja Esports. When it comes to using an image like this, it's okay if you all want to use Cloudinary. That's what stuff like that's for. So if you're comfortable using Cloudinary from Web 115 and other courses, CTI 110 and so on, I encourage you to use it. That's what it's for. I am going to show you all the other way to do this, which would be just to put it into your project here. So I can take this and actually just drag it into my project. And that's going to copy and paste it into my Bootcamp folder. See right there it is, Ninja Esports.png. And I can even look at it here, right? And so I'm, for this, right, like one of the things that we talk about in the design class this semester as well. I know most of you, if not all of you, are also in the design class. When we are looking at what we have here, we can choose to go for a monochromatic color palette, so something that would be within the lines of Ninja, of what's in the logo file here. Or we could go for, some sort of opposite color, which for purple, our opposite is yellow. Right, but there are some other different color families and things of that nature. For our purpose today, let's just go for something simple. Let's just go for like a dark purple. So we're going to want a little bit more blue than red. So this is going to be something like hashtag 346F, or no, that's green, 34006F, something like that, to give us a nice dark purple. And if we look at our site now, we can see nice dark purple there. If we are to compare it against our logo file here, we can see, I was kind of making a guess, but I think I did fairly well. Right, it sort of is that color that's the shadowing on the clothes there. Good guesswork there. And so also what I like to do is I like to put in a bit of a structure here. So I'll put in like my header semantic tags, my body my main semantic tags. Body's part of my HTML skeleton. And my footer semantic tags. And I review those in the module. There's a whole section for semantic tags where I talk about header, main, sections, asides, so on and so forth. For the interest of time here, I'm going to try to keep it relatively simple today. And so now I can identify these and I can use element selectors in CSS if I wanted to. So for example, like body here is an element selector. So I could select header as a header element selector and then use my box model to give it a height. Height in this case could be something like, say, 300 pixels. In this particular course, we're going to talk about dynamic units here in a couple modules. But for right now, we'll still use static units. Width by default is 100%, so we can just leave that. We can add a little background color here. Might want to make this white, might want to make it a darker purple. Right, so if I took that purple there and turned it into a darker purple, it would be something like 1200 3F, maybe. That's going to be a pretty dark purple. And then at that point, we could actually see it. Or I need to save my HTML, right? Remember, save everything. And so once we put a little bit of text in there, like hello world, we should have everything we need to... Oh, I'm on the subpage here. That's the problem. Bootcamp. And there we are. All right, so we can see here, hello world is in black text, so we'll need to change the text color. All right, so we will change this to color white. We can also see that it is... We've got this little gap between the dark header and the background. That's actually something that we can take out in our... we can either use our body here to take that out, or we can use our wildcard selector to take that out. But typically I'll use the body for this, and we'll say padding 0 pixels there on the body, because that's what it is. By default, the body of a web page gets a little bit of padding applied to it. If we put it here in our wildcard selector, it would take the padding off of everything. Right, and so since we don't necessarily want default padding off of everything, we put it on the body because that's what the issue is there. So once we do that, let's see, I also need to do margin, I believe, as well. Margin, 0 pixels, and that should take care of me. Yeah, there we go. Margin 0, padding 0, and we can see that now it's right up against the wall and looking good. If I want to, I can change my font size here and make this a much larger font, like say 48 pixels. I can change my font weight and make it bold or even bolder. Right, so that's going to give me that. I can text align center to center that text. right? You know, this is the kind of stuff that we were doing in Web 115 as we were learning all this kind of stuff, right? I can also put like some, you know, if I wanted to, I could put some top padding on here, padding top, to push that text down a little bit. A smarter idea might be to take this and put it into like an H1. And so now we can manipulate that H1 on its own. And so one of the things that we'll talk about actually later on in the semester is complex selectors in CSS, right? So if I had multiple H1 headers on my page, or multiple H1 headings on my page, right? I could put, I could put an ID in here and deal with it that way, or I could do something like this and say, oh, I'm just going to look for H1s that are inside of headers, and then I can margin top 24 pixels or whatever I want to do, right? So in this case, we don't necessarily want to, you know, it's going to be kind of weird with dealing with the header. I actually think I want to do it with the padding, so I want to take padding and say 48 pixels there in the padding, specifically padding top. Right, like in addition to just kind of showing you all my process, I am also just kind of designing this and building this off the cuff. Right, and so you can see it there. I might want to make that number a little bit smaller, make it like a 36. Right, and there we have that, looking pretty good. You can see when it gets this small, it looks weird. So when it gets to like a mobile size, it looks weird. That's why we want to do responsive websites like we'll be doing later on. Let's go ahead and let's style our main. Our main will be color white, or it'll be background color white rather. Color will be the default black, so we'll just, so we don't have to worry about font color here. We need a width, which in this case our width is going to be 960 pixels. We will center it up using our margin trick, which will give us margin 0 auto. And I also want to give this a min height. And I believe we mentioned, like I mentioned min height in Web 115. We talk about it for just a brief moment. That's min-height. And so the thing there is it's a minimum height. Right? So if the text overflows that minimum height, it's going to grow and meet the required height for the text and the content inside of the box. But it's going to start off and always be this minimum height. So let's make it 600 pixels minimum height by default. So I should always have a 600 pixel tall box here. Right? We can start to see that structure sort of shine through that we've talked about previously. And I've got a header. I've got this main here, and I've got this footer. Let's style the footer really quickly. If I wanted my footer to be styled exactly like my header, right? Remember that we can just go like comma footer. And that'll style my footer exactly the same way as my header. So if we look back here, we can see there's our footer styled in there. Which is pretty nice. The problem here might be that the font size is too big and the font weight is too big. So this would be one of those places where I would pull that out and put it into something somewhere else, like header H1, you know, one of those complex selectors like that. Or again, like put an ID or a class and use an ID or a class selector there on that particular H1. So now when I put text into my footer here, like say a copyright notice, so that's ampersand copy, semicolon, Mr. Ramsey, 2023. If we look at our site here, we can see that it's still white, but it is small. Still white in color, still centered, but small. And so we have basically, we have our structure here built. Right, so from here, let me get a lipsum generator really quickly, just so I can put some H1s. Like one of the things that it asks you all to do in the project is you're supposed to use 3 different headings of at least 2 different levels and 3 paragraphs. So what I might want to do here is make 2 different headings. H1, heading 1. We'll add a paragraph to that, P tag, and just get a, just get a little bit of dummy text here for our purposes. Throw that dummy text in there. Also remember that when we're dealing with headings, like heading levels, like H1, we always start off with H1. And so when it's a subheading of H1, then we do H2. If it's a new topic, we go back to H1. So we can say new main topic here for our heading level, for our second heading level 1 there. Put another dummy text paragraph in there. Right, and then finally we can do a subheading. That would be below that second topic. And throw a dummy text paragraph in there. And that satisfies that requirement. So let me just, I'm just going to look through the requirements so far of the project just to see what all we've done so far that makes this, that you would need to do in the project. Because honestly, we're getting pretty close to the end, right? Like this will probably take you all, a little bit more time than me, right? Because I've done this a few times. That's the whole idea of doing the boot camp multiple times. When we're in these classes, yes, you're getting like you're getting your memory back. You're jogging your memory, but at the same time, you're also practicing, right? And the more practice you can get, the better you'll be. So let's see here. We got our HTML skeleton. We have 3 headings of at least 2 different levels. We have 3 paragraphs. We need to add some pictures. I'll add 1 for our purposes. The heading text should be a different color than the paragraph, so we'll need to do that. Let's add a class here for that. We'll add a class of, say, h_color, and we'll add that to all of our headings, our H1s and our H2. Class equals hcolor there in the opening HTML tag. So then in our CSS here, remember that we refer to classes with a period, h_color. And I think I actually want it to be closer to this color. So we'll use that for our purposes here. So we'll say color and that color. Save that. So at this point now, we've got our heading, we've got our main topic, we've got our subheading. We can see there's a little bit of weirdness here, but we can adjust that. We can deal with that, right? Because one of the things that we need to do is, like, you see how this is like right up against the edge here? That's because of a lack of padding on the main there. So I need to add some padding to my main element. So let's add some padding of, say, 12 pixels should probably be enough. We save that, we have a look, and that fixes us up. right? And so that looks pretty good, right? We have this heading, it's this purple color. We have this paragraph, it is black in color, right? So we have two different heading levels. We have three different headings total. We have 1, 2, 3 different paragraphs. Heading text is a different color. We've got a header section. We haven't put a basic menu in here. And I think that's something that I'm going to let you all work on and do. We practiced that in Web 115 a little bit, so you should be able to get that. That's one of those things where it's like, I could show you how to do one. We're actually going to do an easier one when we get to Module 2, which is our responsive web design here. So I'm going to let you all kind of figure that out, how you all want to figure that out. Again, that's going to be part of it too as we kind of progress, is like some things you kind of have to figure them out, right? That's part of the thing of development. Like one of the reasons why we are developers is because we want to make things that don't exist yet. So if it doesn't exist yet, or there are things that are, we want to try to figure out how we can do it, right? One of the best things that we can do is we can look at things that already exist and try to figure out how we can modify them for our purposes. But let's add an image in here. Let's add that logo in here. We'll do that really quickly just so you all can remember kind of what's up there. So again, you can use your Cloudinary. Your Cloudinary is completely acceptable to use. Or you can put it in your project. If you put it in your project, you'll have to link it similar to the way that we linked our style sheet here. Now I'm going to put this logo in the header. So that's going to be img src equals ninja underscore esports .png, which is the file name. I'm going to give it an alt tag that is Ninja Esports. And we're going to give it a self-closing tag because the image tag is a self-closer. So we'll save that. And we can see now we have it here. But it's big, right? Like it's so big that it's pushing my heading out of the way. And, for some things that might be fine. For this purpose, I don't necessarily want that. So the first thing that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to target my logo here. And so the way that I'm going to handle that is I'm going to give it an ID selector here. So image is going to be hashtag or ID equals logo, getting ahead of myself there. And then in my style.css file, we identify an ID with a hashtag. So that's going to be hashtag logo. And I'm going to change that to be display inline dash block. Right, because remember that by default, an image is an inline element. This one's big, so it's, kind of messing with us here. Another thing that I could do here is change its width, right? If I want to make it a little bit smaller, like maybe 150 pixels instead of the size that it is. Right, if we look at that here, we can see that present now. And looking basically the way that we, kind of the way that we'd want it here, something similar to it. Some other things that we could do here would be maybe adding a float. Adding a float left to it. Right, if we add a float left, we can see that it takes it and pushes it all the way to the left. That does kind of make it look a little janky with the title centered. So we would either we'd probably want to uncenter the title in this sort of case. Right, so if we were to uncenter the title here, so if I look for that H1 header, I could add a text align left here. And also since I'm floating it, that is ignoring the display inline block here, so we could actually comment that out. Because it technically is inline by default. So that's going to give me something like that. I could add padding, I could add margin, I could do various things. I could actually put both of these items in, say, a div, which is non-semantic. So some of the times you'll need something that's non-semantic, something that doesn't have any meaning, just so you can place something easily. And so we use divs for that. I can give this an ID of, say, logo underscore header. And then in our CSS here, I could logo underscore header. Give it a width of, say, 500 pixels. Margin 0 auto. And then we end up with something like that. Right, which looks a little weird. But, you know, it's fine, right? Like we can work with that. We can make that font a little bigger. We can do several things. Right, if I made that font a little bit bigger, my H1 here, say 64 there. You can see what that looks like. I can make this a little wider here. I could go maybe say 700 pixels. You know, what we have influencing us now is a combination of the float and of the font size and of various things. All right, we can work with our div here and say, oh, well, let's do a padding top of, say, 24 pixels. Right, we just play with different aspects of it and see if it works the way that we want it to work. And so we see that kind of pushes that down a little bit. Right, various other things here. Right, and so we end up with, you know, something that's interesting, something that's unique, something that's, you know, good. Right, and again, like one of the things that you all are going to want to do with all this is get your practice in. Right, do this sort of stuff, make changes, see what works, see what doesn't work. Right, this is actually where we're going to go ahead and stop here for the day, because, you know, a lot of what I want you all to get out of this is from your own practice. Doing things yourself and getting in there and working with it and seeing how things change as we make changes to things. And then in a couple weeks, we're going to break things anyway, and we're going to change our understanding of how things work, right? Like right now, they work a certain way. In 3 weeks, they're going to work a completely different way. Right? So just get in there, get your hands dirty, make changes, see how those changes impact you and impact your code and impact your design. And you'll have several opportunities to practice this over the next week, right? It's the same project in Web 2.15 and Web 2.10 and in Web 1.40, right? We're just getting our practice in, we're remembering things, and we're going accordingly. So if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email or a Teams message. That's all that I have for you for today. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.